This is Robert Thibodeau of Mayflower Bookshop, mayflowerbookshop.com on the line. You can find me, Robert Thibodeau, songwriter, Mayflower Bookshop on YouTube. Otherwise, go to mayflowerbookshop.com. Today I would like to share with you a rarity. Rudolf Steiner rarely talks about meditation. And this is from Esoteric Lessons 3, which of course is for sale at the Mayflower. Or you can go to Rudolf Steiner Archives. I don't know if they talk about it on Rudolf Steiner audio, but for you who don't have anybody to read to you or for you, by the way, we're offering a new service at Mayflower where you can buy the book, give me $100, and I'll read it for you. That's correct. A new Christmas gift to give friends. Don't worry about it. He's reading the book for you. Okay. But I want to talk. It's rare when Rudolf Steiner can talk about meditation straight out. He's always talking about the etheric, like cosmic, energetic intelligence all around in the environment. Where he's talking about the purification of the astral plane and what Blavatsky calls making the astral body a cipher, a zero, no desires, freedom from fear and desire. And, he talks very strangely about meditation. And so here I'd like to share with you what his words are and a couple of my thoughts from Lesson 23, January 2nd, 1914, GA 266, Esoteric Lessons 3 by Rudolf Steiner. What every esoteric is heartily interested in is success for his meditative effort. Everyone is successful, even if he doesn't notice it. That's a deep idea, eh? Like, we're all moving toward a moral imagination, and ethical individuation, an ethical imagination and inspiration of the future that moves us forward to better the world, and to better ourselves. And all karma and bad karma is purifying in a way, but could we purify it with our own spiritual doings? I think that's what's up here for grab. And Steiner says every esoteric is in their heart interested in success in their meditative effort. And Steiner says that everyone is successful even if they don't notice it. Budding esoterics often complain about pains. These pains are disorders that arise in the body because the physical and etheric bodies aren't in the right contact or attunement with each other. These irritations or pains were already there before, except that until we quieted down, we didn't really notice it, right? Except that the man or woman hadn't felt them since they were of coarser and more robust nature. One feels them now as an esoteric, since one is finer and more sensitively attuned. An esoteric must learn to bear such pains, or irritations, or bugaboos, right, I say. Of course, Steiner, of course one has to know whether or not the disease should be treated. Why is it that one knows one's physical body so little? Because one lives in it and only perceives it with one's feelings. One sees with one's eyes, and so one can't observe them. Once an esoteric, that's us, once an esoteric gets to the point where he or she withdraws from the physical with the soul and spirit, they will be able to observe the physical body. We're helped to do this if we concentrate our thoughts on a point as much as possible, one point, and then immerse ourselves in this point and live in it for a while. A strengthening of thought power occurs through such concentration, and thereby one can gradually get to the point of observing one's physical body. Then we must become familiar with our etheric body. The etheric body is more difficult, for the etheric body does not have a skin like the physical body. It's a fine tissue that sends out its streams everywhere into the outer world, and it's imprinted by everything that goes on in the outer world, often without our knowing. One learns to feel the etheric body by doing the second auxiliary exercise. It's outer impressions that ordinarily drive a human to act. It's outer impressions that ordinarily drive a man to act. He sees a flower on a meadow, and he stretches out a hand to pick it because it pleases him. But as esoterics, we must get to the point of doing this or that out of an impulse that we give ourselves. Then one will see that it's the etheric body that induces the hand to move. One feels that one's etheric body awakens in this way. Through the awakening etheric body, one gradually learns to experience oneself in an etheric world. Every time I grab something or bump into it, this is really an attack on the outer world. A non-esoteric has no inkling of this, for the guardian of the threshold protects him from this knowledge. But an esoteric person makes his etheric body increasingly independent so that it experiences itself in the etheric world. His organs get finer, and he gets the feeling that spaces aren't only filled with physical objects, but by countless elemental beings who make themselves noticed through bumping, pricking, and burning. One must make room for oneself everywhere in this elemental etheric world by stretching out, withdrawing, pushing, striding forward, and so on. And such movements must occur with the full consciousness that one wants to make them out of one's own being. That's the second thing, initiative actions. One without an initiative will, who can't make room for him or herself in the etheric world, can do just as little there as one who wants to dance on a stage that has chairs standing all over it. The chairs must be removed first. That's what one learns in the spiritual realm through the second exercise. We must do just the opposite to become aware of our astral body. We must hold back desires that are living in the astral body. We must develop equanimity with respect to them. We must create absolute calm in us. Tibetans call it calm, abiding space, equanimity, by the way. Only then do we feel the outer astral world bumping into our inner astral world. Just as we bump into the etheric body, the etheric world, by reaching into it by ourselves in our will, so we feel the outer astral world by remaining quiet in ourselves, by quieting all wishes and desires. Before the astral body gets to this point, it stuns itself with a cry. We know that pain arises when the physical and etheric bodies aren't in the right contact with each other. The astral body feels this as pain. A small child cries when he feels pain. He tries to drown out the pain by crying. An adult might say, ouch, If a man could let his pain stream completely into the sound's vibrations, changes would arise in the etheric body's formation through sound oscillations, so that he or she would become unconscious and feel no pain. But the good gods made men weaker, and that's good. Otherwise, there would be no pain and also no articulated speech. An esoteric must get to the point where he or she can bear pain and everything else that's stimulated in from outside with equanimity, equipoise. Then he won't attack the outer world, but it will attack him. Since he has developed complete calm, the attacks only touch his physical and etheric bodies, and the astral body remains untouched. I mean, you can imagine that you have this silent, stillness, compassionate astral body that's like a mother to everything, and things happen, and you don't react, you don't get angry, you don't get... I mean, I think that's what he's getting at, but what do you think? Send me your questions. Since he has developed complete calm, the attacks only touch his physical and etheric bodies, and the astral body remains untouched. It becomes free, and one can observe it. So I get to know my astral body through the equanimity exercise. Finally, I must also get to know my ego. I can't feel my ego because I'm living in it. That's why we must pour it out into the world. I become familiar with my ego through what we call positivity. If we look, so finally, when we get to know the ego, you can't feel your ego because you're living in it. That's why we have to pour it out into the outer world and become familiar. You can become familiar with the ego through what we call positivity. If we pour out our positiveness to the world, we kind of can experience our ego. If we look at a rotting dog's beautiful teeth, like Christ Jesus did, Buddha did too. They had a whole story about seeing these beautiful teeth in a rotting dead dog. I wonder if that's where the Christians got it. Anyway, that's Robert talking. Okay, back to Steiner. If we look at a rotting dog's beautiful teeth like Christ Jesus did, then we don't see the ugliness, but we dive down so far into everything that we arrive at the good. I just want to pause to say that this is where we look at everybody to see the descent of the second person of the Holy Trinity, the Solar Logos, as the Son God, the Christ Son, S-U-N, that's a spark inside of each one of us. We can divine the divine in each other in a holy space of the Virgin, Isis and Mary and all that, but we can also divine this spark. So here's Steiner. If we look at the rotting dog's beautiful teeth, like, really Buddha and Christ Jesus did, then we don't see the ugliness, but we dive down so far into everything that we arrive at the good. Thereby, we get away from our ego and can observe it. The ego is love and will. When we see our ego, we see love and will. The will to the good, the will to aspire, the will to know, the ego is love. And the transformation, I think, of the suffering we see through compassion is a higher love and higher ego. Okay, Steiner, through the developed will, we get to know the substance of all things that originate in the divine world. Through love, we learn to experience the essence of things. Thus, through will and love, we press forward to cognition that's free of personal ego, and I'd say free of separate ego. It's a unifying ethical imagination, even trying to understand what I, and especially Rudolf Steiner, is saying here. As a spiritual ego, we learn to dive deep into the being and substance of all things that come from the spiritual father ground. That includes our own ego. Our ego looks at us from all created things, The pupil attains the swan stage when he can experience that. Our ego looks at us from all created things. We look at all the created things and we see our ego looking at us. I mean, it reminds me of when Steiner said, if you want to see a picture of your true self, you look at everyone you see in a year. Some people you see regularly, and some people once a year, and some people once a month, or once a week, or once every 2 weeks. You look at everyone you see in a year and hold them all at once in your mind, and that's a pretty good picture of your whole self. So here he's saying, this ego looks at us from all created things, our ego. The pupil attains the swan stage when he can experience that. Now at the fifth stage, physical, etheric, astral, and ego, at the fifth stage, we develop spirit self, or manas. There we mustn't cling to what we previously saw, heard, or learned. Let go. We must learn to ignore awe of that, to receive what approaches us as if it were completely emptied of previous things. Manas can only be developed if one learns to feel that everything that we acquired through our own thinking is of little value in comparison to what we can acquire when we open ourselves to the thoughts that stream in out of the cosmos that was woven by the gods. So here Steiner's telling us to let go of all the past. Well, we're not letting go. We know that it won't serve us, and that we have to open ourselves to the cosmos and what it's trying to tell us from the gods, or the great virtue, the human beings that have become, like Jesus says, ye are gods in the becoming. So there's people who are very advanced, bodhisattvas and spiritual teachers, spiritual beings. Okay, let's Steiner. We open ourselves to the thoughts that stream in out of the cosmos that was woven by the gods. Everything that surrounds us arose. This has to be a tricky indication of the rose that blossoms from the cross of the four: physical, etheric, astral, and ego. This is the rosy cross. The death of the desire in the past, and this rose blooms for the present into the future, I'm saying. But let's go back to Steiner. Everything that surrounds us arose from these thoughts of the gods. We hadn't been able... See, the Rosicrucian impulse is to purify, die, and get born again. Die and become. That we become, we're not just born with stuff and given stuff. And so the Michaelic impulse is that we're receiving what the cosmos has. So after we've completed these Rosicrucian initiations, now we're going into the Michaelic cosmic intelligence. This is what Robert says. But let's see what Rudolf Steiner indicates here. And he's very subtle and very direct. Our own thinking is of little value in comparison to what we can acquire when we open ourselves to the thoughts that stream in and out of the cosmos that was woven by the gods. Everything that surrounds us arose from these thoughts of the gods. We hadn't been able to find them through our previous thinking. The things concealed them from us. The things concealed them from us. Now we get an inkling of the divine that's behind everything, like a hidden riddle. We begin to see how few of these riddles we had fathomed. And we find that we really have to remove everything that we've learned so far from our soul. That we must approach everything quite open-mindedly, like a child. That the divine riddles that surround us are only given to the open-mindedness of the soul. The soul must become childlike to be able to press into the kingdoms of heaven. Then hidden wisdom, or manas, streams toward the childlike soul like a gift of grace from the spiritual world. A man or woman does not have to go further, since they make contact with the spiritual world through these 5 stages. Through continual repetition of these 5 exercises, a harmony of interaction between the various capacities that are to be attained through them must now be produced. This is brought about by the 6th exercise. Now I'm just wondering out loud if that's the Buddhic life spirit. And also we just went through a period of the manas that's very similar to where Rudolf Steiner talks about emptying your perceptions. I added to it that you take a breath in, and he talks about breathing to Ida Wegman in Who is Ida Wegman? But you take a breath in and you empty your perceptions into your heart, like Steiner indicates, into this nothingness that's similar to your unbornness between your last death and this birth. You empty your perceptions into this nothingness and experience your unbornness and create out of nothing, which is the only way to create karma-free action, is to create out of this nothingness, unbornness. I'm adding that to this picture, like we're making a huge gourmet, transcendental, incarnational spiritual meal. Okay. The 6th exercise. These exercises are of the very greatest importance. A soul can find its way into spiritual worlds through these exercises. You'll find references to these 5 exercises going into the 6th everywhere in the books and lectures. And no esoteric person, no esoteric class would have to take place if everyone read them attentively and awakened the forces of these exercises to life in his soul. They serve as a support for the specially given exercises. So at this point, you could go back and listen to this whole little talk I gave and come up to this point again if you like. So let's continue with Steiner. An esoteric must be very attentive, even to the smallest things. He or she must observe everything consciously and conscientiously, in a quite different way than it's done in the physical world. As soon as you approach the spiritual worlds, a more conscientious, awakened observation. For things in the spiritual realm are much more subtle and fine than in the physical one. That's why an esoteric must keep on doing these exercises and repeatedly rouse himself to new efforts and observations. For otherwise, one can't get insights into the spiritual world. And an esoteric must especially, a to-be initiate, a practicing bodhisattva, right? An esoteric must especially be patient, or be the patient. Many people think that after they've exercised for a short time, they should then get into the spiritual world, that all portals to it will be open to them. But just consider that a significant impulse or idea takes 19 years to be inwardly well grasped and understood. On the side, you can read Rudolf Steiner in 10 years, read the same book, and 3 months later read the same book, and it's always something new you discover and deeper, and I think that's what he's getting at here. But here he's talking about a nodal cycle of 19 years to be inwardly, 1819, well grasped and understood. If an esoteric thinks that after some exercising he'll soon be mature enough for entry into spiritual worlds, then it's as if a child who just learned to speak would say, "It's boring to have to wait for years until I become a man or woman. I want to be a man or woman right away." Another thing that one has to learn in esoteric life is truthfulness. One who hasn't already learned it in physical life. So I think the patience we need is the mother's patience, the birth, the child Buddha Christ-like being, the wisdom and love of the Buddha Christ, Hermes, Sophia. And that is the 6th level, I think. And the 7th level of Atma, or spirit self, spirit man, spirit human, is the truth. And Steiner's talking about truth, but this is what I think. But let's get to Steiner. Another thing that one has to learn in esoteric life is truthfulness. One who hasn't already learned it in physical life will have a lot of trouble in his ascent into the spiritual world. Since he must leave his logical thinking and everything that's connected with the intellect behind. And he's not corrected by facts in the spiritual world as he is here in the physical world. The good gods wanted to educate the human being to be truthful when they placed him or her in the physical world, where every lie, that is, everything that doesn't correspond to the facts, is corrected by facts. The inclination for truthfulness can only be acquired in the physical world and not in the spiritual one. Finally, an esoteric must try to habitually acquire a good memory. The etheric body is the preserver of memory. But without the physical body, it wouldn't be able to preserve it very well. The nerves get an impression, and this must be written into the physical body. The latter is, as it were, the recording apparatus for what a man wants to retain. And when he wants to remember something, he penetrates the physical body with the etheric body to the place where what's supposed to be remembered is inscribed. The memory picture becomes alive and the man reads it from the physical body. One's reminded of when you wake up in the morning, your ego and astral body come back into the etheric and physical, and to a degree, the ego astral body can translate the spiritual experiences during sleep into the etheric. You can remember things, but usually you remember dreams that we have to pierce with some spiritual insight to find the truth and meaning. Okay, Steiner. Students repeat something they have to memorize until it has been inscribed in the etheric. Then it may happen that when they, for instance, learn there stood a castle so high and grand, they press it forcibly into the physical body with the help of the sounds. Such inscribing and reading must become habitual in the sense that it becomes an inner habit to permeate all of one's deeds with attentiveness and reflection. Just an aside here, how can you remember something if you're not present for it? So by being present and attentive and reflecting and breathing into your heart, I'm telling you that the heart is the memory theater, and you breathe the perception into your heart, and your heart helps you remember. And it also brings the spiritual into the body through the etheric, astro-etheric into the physical. Okay, Steiner. One can't use the physical body as a memory organ for spiritual experiences. Habitual activities must replace it. We must summon the nuance of feeling that belongs to this before our soul. The content of what flows to a meditator when he makes the self empty after a meditation. The content of what flows to a meditator when he or she makes themselves empty after a meditation. Emptiness practice. Also of the meditation's influence is a matter of merit and virtue, capacity. A meditation will never be the same twice. What flows to us will depend upon our ethical imagination and morality and love of truth, and on how we've lived since the last meditation. If we don't remain entirely truthful, or if we let anger or aggravation arise in us, then nothing from the spiritual world can stream into us. If we didn't remain entirely truthful, or if we've let anger or aggravation arise, then nothing from the spiritual world can stream into us properly. And we get what we deserve. This is Steiner. If we trace these things attentively, we'll always find the reason why we weren't graced with the Spirit in some untruth, in some surging up of anger or the like. This is Rudolf Steiner, Esoteric Lessons 3, available at the Mayflower Bookshop. So another way that completes the Steiner, but I want to add a couple things. I think that it's really important to have sacred objects that remind you of virtues in your higher self and people you love and the higher side of experiences, not just the husk of memory. They have a meditation altar. Ultimately, your heart is the altar that alters your transformative self for the better when moral imagination and ethical individuation, perceptive truth of what we could be comes into being and becoming and interests us. I think that letting all your breath out and then taking a deep breath with your perceptions riding the breath into your heart and emptying your perceptions in your heart, looking at your unbornness and your stillness. And when we breathe out, we bless the world with our holiness, with our virtue, our right intention and generation of bodhisattvic resolve. Our dying in the Christos, like we're born in the Father's situation of the depths that are trying to purify and echo the heights. And we die in the Christ, the wisdom of Buddha, the love of Christ. We die to our separateness in this higher I am that unites us with all I ams. Atonement is at one-ment. To become at one, not atone, but become at one. Plato talks about this too. Love one another, but arise in sin no more. See, that's the whole purification thing in the rose. So we let go of our breath and we're sitting up straight, we're comfortable, and we breathe in and empty all of our perceptions, and our whole past has to like dissolve into this uniting with our unbornness and our stillness, our calm abiding, equanimity and space abiding principle. And we breathe in and we look at all the infinite possibility that is the rest of us in the stillness of thinking in the third passage of the Foundation Stone meditation of Rudolf Steiner. And that it's from this heart that we're founded, grounded, rooted, and still here. That we arise into our pure thinking with a will to the good, true, beautiful, and to be of service and sacrifice and surrender to these higher ideals that we share with the world. From this stillness we arise from the heart into a single will for the good in the world. and we go back into the world, right? It's a very interesting, fun, exciting, adventurous approach to meditation. Sometimes it's fun to say Om, A-U-M. It's like the Trinity again. Or the Iao. The Iao. The I-A-O. The I am the Alpha and Omega. That higher I that unites the all eyes as a common mystical body of Christ, they would call it in Christianity. And the new sphere, the return to the Garden of Eden, the place of the etheric finding of the Christ, the reappearance in the etheric of the awakened, anointed, universal understanding, knowing, participatoriness. So this is Robert Thibodeau of MayflowerBookshop.com. Go to my website. I hope that you can dare to share, care, and dare to share. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you find it in your heart, donate books or money to help support this kind of like a free school, the spiritual high school of education for the poor in heart and mind, the poor in imagination, to inspire and spark the intuition of each individual to be a co-creative with the future destiny of this planet, to be a full participant with the whole of one's life and the whole of the brother-sisterhood of humanity, right? Through love and truth and spirit soul. This is Robert Thibodeau of MayflowerBookshop.com at your higher self service. I'll see you around the next turn and return. See ya.